Eli Carter was a poor human mechanic on the outer station called Grey Dock 7, a cold metal place floating at the edge of known space. The station was old and noisy, full of broken machines and tired workers who came from many worlds to earn small money fixing ships or carrying cargo. Every day the same loud sounds filled the air: engines roaring, metal doors slamming, traders shouting, and cargo robots rolling across the long hallways for most people on the station. Life was simple and hard: work all day, eat cheap food, and sleep in small metal rooms. Eli was used to this life. He repaired small engines, damaged drones, and broken cargo tools. The work paid little, but it was enough to survive if he was careful. That evening, Eli finished fixing a cracked cooling unit on an old cargo shuttle. The alien pilot paid him only a few credits, barely enough for a small meal. Still, Eli was grateful because he had not eaten since morning. He walked slowly through the crowded market hall of the station. Bright lights shined over small food stalls where many strange smells filled the air: roasted meat, hot spices, and alien foods from distant worlds. But Eli ignored most of them because they were too expensive. Finally, he stopped at a small human food stand. The old vendor gave him a simple meal: a warm bread roll and a small piece of cooked protein. It was not much, but to Eli, it looked perfect after a long day of work. He thanked the vendor and walked away, holding the small food box carefully in his hands. The station corridors were quieter in the outer sections, where broken lights flickered and fewer people passed by. Eli liked walking this way because it was peaceful compared to the noisy markets. He turned into a narrow metal alley between two storage bays, planning to sit and eat before going back to his tiny room. But then he stopped. Someone was sitting at the end of the corridor. At first, Eli thought it was just a small alien traveler resting, but when he walked closer, he realized it was a child. The small alien child sat on the cold metal floor with her knees pulled close to her body. Her skin had a soft silver color, and faint blue lines glowed gently across her arms. She looked weak and tired. Her large eyes watched the people walking past the corridor entrance. Many passed by without stopping. Some looked at her for a moment, then kept walking. No one helped her. Eli frowned slightly. He knew the station was not a safe place for children, especially alone. Slowly he walked closer. The child looked up at him with wide glowing eyes. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Eli noticed something that made his stomach tighten. The child was staring at the food in his hands, not with curiosity, but with deep hunger. Eli understood that look very well. He had seen it in mirrors many times before. He sat down slowly on the metal floor, a short distance from her. "Are you lost?" he asked gently. The alien child did not answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the small meal box. Eli opened the box slowly, the warm smell of food filling the quiet corridor. His stomach growled immediately. He had been waiting all day to eat this meal. For a moment he hesitated. This was the only food he had. If he gave it away, he would go to sleep hungry again. But when he looked at the child, he saw how thin she looked, how tired her eyes were. Eli sighed quietly. Without saying anything, he held the food box out toward her. "You can have it," he said simply. The alien child blinked in surprise, as if she did not understand at first. Slowly she reached forward and accepted the food with small shaking hands. She began eating carefully, almost slowly, as if she was afraid the food might disappear. Eli leaned back against the cold wall and watched quietly. Strangely, he did not feel angry about giving away his dinner. In fact, he felt a little better. After a few minutes, the child finished the meal. She looked up at him again. The soft blue lines on her skin glowed slightly brighter now. Then she spoke in a quiet voice. "You are kind human," she said softly. Eli smiled a little. "It was just food," he replied. But the child tilted her head slightly and said something that made Eli pause. "My father will be happy," she said. Eli frowned in confusion. Before he could ask what she meant, a loud alarm suddenly screamed across the station. Red warning lights began flashing along the corridor walls, far away. Deep engines thundered like distant storms. Eli stood quickly and looked toward the large station windows at the end of the hall. Outside in the dark space beyond the station, enormous shadows were moving. Dozens of massive warships were appearing from hyperspace, and they were surrounding the station. The red warning lights continued flashing across the metal walls of Grey Dock 7. The loud alarm echoed through every corridor of the station, making workers stop and look around in confusion and fear. Eli Carter stood near the narrow corridor window, staring into space with wide eyes. Just moments ago, the sky outside had been empty, dark and silent like always. Now it was filled with massive shapes. Huge warships slowly appeared from glowing blue hyperspace gates, their metal hulls shining under the distant stars. One ship was large, 10 ships were frightening. But what Eli saw outside was far worse. There were dozens of them, an entire fleet. Each warship was larger than the station itself, covered with strange glowing symbols and powerful weapon towers. People began shouting in the distance. Footsteps rushed through the hallways as workers and travelers ran in panic. Someone yelled, "It is an invasion." Another voice shouted, "We are under attack." Eli felt his chest tighten. Grey Dock 7 was only a small trading station. It had no defense fleet strong enough to stop an armada like that. If those ships wanted to destroy the station, it would take only seconds. He quickly turned around to look at the alien child. But something about her surprised him. She was not scared. While everyone else on the station was running or shouting, the small silver-skinned child sat calmly on the floor, watching the flashing lights with quiet curiosity. Eli knelt beside her again. "Kid, we need to move," he said quickly, but the child looked up at him and spoke in the same calm voice as before. "Do not worry," she said. Eli blinked in confusion. Not worry? An entire war fleet had just arrived. Every instinct in his body told him something terrible was about to happen. Suddenly the station speakers came alive with loud static. A deep robotic voice spoke across every hall and room. "Emergency alert. Unidentified military fleet detected. All personnel remain calm and stay in secure areas." But the message only made people more nervous. Heavy footsteps suddenly echoed from the far end of the corridor. A group of station security officers ran past the hallway entrance, carrying pulse rifles and wearing armored suits. They looked tense and frightened. One officer stopped when he noticed Eli and the alien child sitting in the corridor. "What are you doing here?" The officer demanded. "You need to move to the emergency shelter." Eli nodded and began to stand. But before he could move, the officer's communication device suddenly crackled with a loud message. The voice on the radio sounded shocked. "Security teams, listen carefully," the voice said urgently. "We have received a transmission from the fleet outside." The officer frowned, pressing his hand to the side of his helmet to hear better. "What kind of transmission?" he asked. For a moment there was only static. Then the voice answered slowly, "They are not demanding surrender." The officer looked confused. "Then what do they want?" he asked. The voice on the radio sounded even more stunned now. "They are searching for someone." Eli felt a strange chill run down his back. Searching for someone? Why would a fleet this large come just to find a single person? The officer turned and looked around the corridor carefully, as if suddenly worried about something else. At that moment, the alien child slowly stood up from the floor. Her small silver feet touched the cold metal ground quietly. The glowing blue lines on her arms began shining a little brighter than before. Eli noticed it immediately. "So many ships," the child said softly while looking toward the window. Her voice almost sounded thoughtful. The officer finally noticed her as well and stepped closer. "Hey kid, where are your parents?" he asked. The child looked at him calmly. "My father is looking for me," she answered. The officer sighed in frustration, thinking she was just confused or scared. "Yeah, well, the whole galaxy might be looking for someone right now," he muttered. But Eli suddenly felt uneasy. Something about the child's calm behavior did not feel normal. The station speaker suddenly activated again. This time the voice sounded even more serious. "Attention all security teams." The announcement said, "The fleet commander has sent a message to the station. They say they will board the station in 5 minutes." The corridor fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Boarding troops. Heavily armed soldiers would soon be walking through the station halls. The security officer cursed under his breath. "This is bad," he whispered. But at that moment, something strange happened. The alien child slowly began walking toward the main corridor. Eli quickly reached out. "Wait, where are you going?" he asked. The child looked back at him with her glowing eyes. "They have come for me," she said simply. Eli felt a cold wave of confusion run through him. Before he could respond, the sound of heavy landing engines shook the station walls. A deep metallic boom echoed through the structure as massive docking clamps connected to the station exterior. The fleet had arrived. Moments later, loud footsteps echoed from the far hallway. A group of tall armored soldiers entered the corridor. Their armor was dark and advanced, covered with the same glowing symbols that appeared on the giant warships outside. They carried powerful weapons that looked far beyond anything the station security possessed. The security officer raised his rifle nervously, but the soldiers did not aim their weapons. Instead, their leader stepped forward slowly, scanning the hallway. Then his helmet sensor suddenly focused on one small figure standing beside Eli. The alien child, the tall commander, froze. For a long moment, the entire corridor remained silent. Then something happened that shocked everyone watching. The powerful armored soldiers immediately lowered their weapons, and one by one, they dropped to their knees in front of the small alien child. The commander bowed his head deeply and spoke with absolute respect. "Princess," he said, "we have finally found you." The corridor of Grey Dock 7 became completely silent. Eli Carter stood frozen beside the small alien child, trying to understand what he had just seen. Only seconds ago, those armored soldiers had looked like unstoppable warriors, powerful enough to conquer the entire station. But now every single one of them was kneeling, their heads lowered in deep respect toward the small silver child. Eli slowly looked down at her. She stood calmly beside him, her glowing blue eyes watching the soldiers without fear. The security officer who had been standing nearby lowered his rifle slowly, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. "Princess?" he repeated quietly. The tall armored commander raised his head slightly, but remained kneeling. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "the Emperor has been searching the entire galaxy for you. You disappeared from the royal vessel 3 hours ago. The fleet was deployed immediately." The child crossed her small arms behind her back, looking almost thoughtful. "I was not lost," she said softly. "I was exploring." The commander hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "Your Highness," he continued respectfully, "your disappearance caused great concern. The Emperor ordered every nearby fleet to search for you." Eli felt his head spinning. An emperor? A royal fleet? A princess? He slowly looked out the corridor window again, where dozens of enormous warships floated silently around the station. Those ships had come for this one small child. The security officer suddenly cleared his throat nervously. "Wait. Hold on," he said, trying to process the situation. "You are telling me this little girl is the reason an entire war fleet just surrounded my station?" The commander finally stood up, towering over everyone in his dark armor. "She is not just a girl," he replied calmly. "She is Princess Alera, daughter of the Emperor of the Orion Dominion." The name meant nothing to Eli, but the security officer suddenly turned pale. "The Orion Dominion," he whispered. Everyone in the outer colonies knew that name. The Orion Dominion was the most powerful empire in this region of the galaxy. Its fleets controlled thousands of star systems. Even the strongest human governments avoided conflict with them. And the daughter of their emperor had been sitting alone on the cold floor of a forgotten station corridor. Eli slowly ran a hand through his hair, still trying to understand everything. "You mean," he said slowly, "this whole fleet came here because she wandered off?" The commander nodded once. "Correct." The princess looked slightly annoyed. "I did not wander," she said calmly. "I wanted to see the station." The commander remained respectful but firm. "Your safety is our highest priority," he answered. The princess looked toward Eli. Then she pointed at him with one small finger. "This human helped me," she said simply. Immediately every armored soldier in the corridor turned their helmets toward Ile. Ile suddenly felt very uncomfortable under the attention of several heavily armed alien warriors. The commander studied him carefully for a moment. "You assisted the princess?" he asked. Eli shrugged slightly. "I just gave her my food," he replied. The commander tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing the answer. "Why?" he asked. Eli blinked in surprise. "Because she was hungry," he said simply. For a moment, the commander said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. "Your actions will be reported to the Emperor," he said. Eli was not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. The princess stepped closer to Eli and gently held his hand. "I told you," she said softly. "My father will be happy." Before Eli could respond, the commander's wrist device suddenly lit up with a holographic signal. He activated it immediately. A tall blue hologram appeared in the air, showing the image of a massive alien figure sitting on a dark throne. Even as a hologram, the presence of the figure felt powerful and intimidating. His armor looked ancient and regal, decorated with glowing symbols. His glowing eyes slowly scanned the corridor scene. The soldiers immediately knelt again. "Your Majesty," the commander said, "we have located Princess Alera." The hologram's eyes moved toward the small child standing beside Eli. For a moment, the powerful emperor simply looked at her silently. Then his deep voice echoed through the corridor. "Alera," he said, "you caused quite a disturbance." The princess smiled slightly. "I was curious," she replied calmly. The emperor sighed slowly. "You always are," he said. Then his glowing eyes shifted toward Eli. The air suddenly felt heavier. "And who is this human?" the emperor asked. The commander answered immediately. "This individual assisted the princess while she was on the station." The emperor studied Eli carefully through the hologram. Eli suddenly felt very small under that powerful gaze. Finally, the emperor spoke again. "Human," he said slowly, "you gave my daughter your food." Eli scratched the back of his neck nervously. "Yeah, I guess I did," he answered. The emperor leaned slightly forward on his throne. "Interesting," he said quietly. For several seconds he said nothing more, as if thinking deeply. Then he spoke again. "I wish to meet this human." The commander nodded immediately. "As you command, Your Majesty." The hologram disappeared. The commander turned toward Ile again. "The Emperor requests your presence aboard the royal flagship," he said calmly. Eli stared at him in shock. "The Emperor wants to meet me?" The commander nodded once more. "Immediately," he said, outside the station window. The largest warship in the fleet slowly rotated toward the docking port, waiting. And Eli Carter, the poorest mechanic on Grey Dock 7, suddenly realized he was about to meet one of the most powerful rulers in the entire galaxy. Eli Carter had never left Grey Dock 7 in a royal escort before. Only 1 hour ago, he had been a tired mechanic sitting in a dark corridor with an empty stomach. Now he was walking through one of the largest warships he had ever seen, surrounded by armored alien soldiers. The transition felt unreal. The shuttle that carried him from the station had docked with the massive flagship of the Orion Dominion. Up close, the ship looked even more intimidating than it had from the station window. Its surface was covered with dark metal plates, glowing blue energy lines, and weapon towers large enough to destroy entire cities. Inside, the ship was quiet, clean, and powerful. The hallways were wide and smooth, built from dark polished metal that reflected soft blue lights along the walls. Everywhere Eli looked, he saw advanced technology far beyond anything used on Grey Dock 7. Tall alien guards stood at every corner, their armor shining under the lights, their glowing helmets watching everything carefully. The small princess walked beside Eli as if she had done this 1,000 times before. She looked completely relaxed. Eli leaned slightly closer to her as they walked. "So, you do this often?" he asked quietly. Princess Alera looked up at him with curiosity. "Do what?" she asked. "Disappear and cause a whole fleet to panic," Eli replied. The princess thought about it for a moment. "Sometimes," she answered honestly. Eli shook his head slowly, unable to decide if that answer made things better or worse. Ahead of them, the corridor opened into a massive chamber. The doors slowly slid open with a deep mechanical sound. Inside was the throne hall of the flagship. The room was enormous, tall enough for small ships to fit inside. Huge pillars rose toward the ceiling, glowing with faint energy symbols. At the far end of the hall stood a dark throne platform made from black stone and metal. And sitting on that throne was the Emperor of the Orion Dominion. Even from a distance, his presence felt overwhelming. He was larger than most aliens Eli had seen, wearing heavy armor decorated with glowing ancient markings. A long dark cape flowed behind the throne like a shadow. His glowing eyes watched calmly as Eli and the princess approached. The soldiers escorting them stopped halfway through the hall and knelt again. Eli suddenly realized he was the only person still standing normally. He quickly tried to copy the soldiers and awkwardly lowered his head slightly. The Emperor raised one hand slowly, signaling everyone to rise. "Alera," the Emperor said in a deep voice that echoed through the hall. The princess walked forward happily. "Hello, father," she said simply. For a moment, the Emperor studied her carefully. "You left the royal vessel again," he said calmly. "I wanted to explore," she replied. The Emperor sighed quietly but did not look angry. His glowing eyes then moved toward Eli. "And this is the human," he said. Eli suddenly felt every guard in the room watching him again. He cleared his throat slightly. Hello," he said awkwardly. The Emperor slowly stood from his throne. Even standing still, he looked powerful and commanding. "You gave my daughter your food," the Emperor said. "Yes," Eli answered. "You knew nothing about her," the Emperor continued. "Correct," Eli replied. The Emperor stepped down from the throne platform slowly. Each step echoed through the large hall. "Yet you still helped her," the Emperor said. Eli shrugged slightly. "She looked hungry," he said simply. The Emperor stopped a few steps away from him, studying him closely. "You are poor," the Emperor said. Eli nodded honestly. "Very," he answered. "And still you gave away your only meal." The Emperor continued. Eli thought about the question for a moment. Then he answered quietly. "I know what hunger feels like," he said. The large throne hall became completely silent. The Emperor's glowing eyes remained fixed on Eli. For several seconds he said nothing. Then suddenly the Emperor began to laugh. The deep sound echoed through the hall, surprising everyone. Even the soldiers looked slightly confused. Finally the Emperor stopped laughing and looked back at Eli. Finally the Emperor stopped laughing and looked back at Eli. The princess smiled proudly beside Eli. "I told you he was kind," she said. The Emperor nodded slowly. "Kindness is rare in this galaxy," he said. Then he looked back at Eli again with interest. "Tell me something, human," the Emperor continued. "If you knew who she was, would you still have given her your food?" Eli thought about the question carefully. Then he gave a small smile. "Honestly?" he said. The Emperor nodded once. Eli shrugged again. "I probably would have been too scared to get close," he admitted. For a moment the Emperor stared at him. Then he laughed again, even louder than before, honest and kind. The Emperor said with amusement, "That is a rare combination." But then the Emperor's expression slowly became serious again. "There is something you should know, human," he said. Eli frowned slightly, sensing something important was coming. The Emperor folded his arms behind his back and looked down at him. "My daughter was not simply exploring your station," the Emperor said slowly. Eli felt a strange feeling in his chest. "What do you mean?" he asked. The Emperor's glowing eyes narrowed slightly. "She was testing your species," he said. And Eli suddenly realized that giving away one small meal might have been part of something far bigger than he ever imagined. The throne hall of the great flagship became quiet again after the Emperor spoke those words. Eli Carter stood still, trying to understand what he had just heard. Princess Alera had not simply been exploring the station. She had been testing humanity. Eli slowly looked down at the small silver princess standing beside him. "You were testing us?" he asked with surprise. Princess Alera nodded calmly. Yes, she said softly. The Emperor stepped slowly across the throne hall floor, his heavy armor making quiet metal sounds with each step. For many years, the Emperor explained, our empire has watched the younger species of this galaxy. We study how they behave when they think no one powerful is watching them. Ayle listened carefully, still confused. The Emperor continued speaking in his deep, steady voice. Many civilizations in this galaxy are strong, intelligent, and advanced. But strength and intelligence are not the most important qualities for survival. Eli frowned slightly. What is more important? He asked. The Emperor looked at his daughter before answering. Compassion, he said simply. Princess Alera stepped forward and clasped her small hands behind her back. My father wanted to know which species could become trusted allies of the Orion Dominion, she explained. So I travel quietly to different worlds and colonies. I appear alone and helpless, and I observe how people react. Eli slowly began to understand. You pretend to be a lost child, he said. Yes, the princess replied honestly. The Emperor's eyes darkened slightly as he continued the explanation. You would be surprised how many advanced species fail this simple test, he said. Eli felt uneasy hearing that. What do you mean? He asked. The Emperor turned and walked slowly toward a large viewing window behind the throne platform. Outside the window, the enormous warships of the Orion fleet floated silently in space. In some places, the Emperor said, people ignored her completely. In others, they tried to take advantage of what they believed was a helpless child. Eli felt his stomach tighten hearing that. The Emperor continued. One civilization even attempted to capture her and sell her as a rare alien specimen. Eli's eyes widened in shock. Princess Alera nodded quietly. It happens more often than you would think, she said. The Emperor turned back toward Eli. But on your small station, he said slowly, my daughter encountered something different. Lily rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I only gave her food, he said. The Emperor raised one hand slightly. You gave away your only meal, he corrected. You helped someone when you had nothing to gain. The Emperor looked directly at Eli now, his glowing eyes sharp and thoughtful. That is the rarest kind of kindness, he said. Eli felt slightly uncomfortable being studied so seriously. It was not a big deal, he said quietly. Princess Alera shook her head immediately. It was a big deal, she said firmly. Many others walked past me. They saw that I was hungry, but they did nothing. Lile thought back to the corridor on the station. It was true, many people had walked by without stopping. The Emperor returned to the throne platform and sat down slowly. For a few moments he remained silent, thinking carefully. Then he spoke again. For centuries, the Orion Dominion has searched for a species worthy of true alliance. Ayle raised an eyebrow slightly. You mean like military allies? He asked. More than that, the Emperor replied. We seek partners who understand responsibility, loyalty, and compassion. The Emperor leaned forward slightly on the throne, and today, a poor human mechanic may have changed how my empire sees your entire species. Eli blinked in surprise. Wait. What? He said. Princess Alera smiled slightly. You were the first person who helped me without hesitation, she said. The Emperor nodded slowly. My daughter has visited many stations, colonies, and cities, he said. But until today, she had not reported a result that impressed me. The Emperor's voice became calm but powerful again. Your action has given humanity something very valuable. Eli crossed his arms slightly, still trying to understand the situation. And what exactly is that? He asked. The Emperor looked directly at him again. An opportunity, he said. Eli waited for him to continue. The Emperor's glowing eyes narrowed slightly as he spoke. I am now considering something that has never happened before in the history of the Orion Dominion. The entire hall became quiet again. Even the guards seemed more attentive now. Eli felt a strange nervous feeling growing in his chest. What are you considering? He asked slowly. The Emperor did not answer immediately. Instead he looked toward his daughter again. Princess Alera gave him a small nod. Only then did the Emperor look back at Eli and speak the words that would soon change everything. "Human," the Emperor said, "I am considering making humanity an official ally of my empire." Eli stared at him in shock, but the Emperor had not finished speaking yet. "There is only one question left before I make that decision," he said. And Eli suddenly realized that whatever answer he gave next might decide the future of the entire human race. The great throne hall of the Orion flagship was completely silent after the Emperor finished speaking. Eli Carter stood in the center of the room, feeling the weight of every eye watching him. He was only a poor mechanic from a forgotten station, yet somehow he had become part of a decision that could change the future of humanity. The Emperor leaned slightly forward on his dark throne, studying Eli carefully. "I have one final question," the Emperor said in his deep voice. Eli swallowed quietly. "All right," he said, trying to stay calm. The Emperor folded his armored hands together. "If humanity becomes an ally of the Orion Dominion," he said slowly, "it would bring great power and wealth to your species. Our technology alone could advance your civilization by hundreds of years." Eli imagined powerful ships, advanced cities, and safe colonies protected by the strongest empire in the galaxy. It sounded unbelievable, but the Emperor continued speaking. "However," he said, "such alliances also come with responsibility." Eli nodded slowly. "That makes sense," he said. The Emperor's glowing eyes focused on him again. "So my question is simple," the Emperor said. "If humanity receives this power, what will your people do with it?" The question surprised Eli. He expected something about loyalty or military service. Instead, the Emperor was asking about humanity's future choices. Eli thought for a moment before answering. "I am probably not the best person to speak for all humans," he admitted. A few soldiers in the hall shifted slightly, but the Emperor remained calm. "Speak honestly," the Emperor said. Eli slowly looked around the massive hall, then back at the Emperor. "Humans are not perfect," Eli said. "We argue, we compete, and sometimes we make bad decisions." The Emperor nodded slightly. "That is true for many species," he said. Eli continued speaking carefully. "But humans also learn from mistakes," he said. "When things become difficult, we help each other." The princess watched him quietly with interest. Eli continued, "If humans gained more power and technology, I would hope we use it to build better worlds, safer colonies, and maybe help people who are struggling like the workers on my station." The Emperor listened silently to every word. Finally, Eli shrugged slightly and added honestly, "That is what I would want anyway." The Emperor remained quiet for several long seconds. The throne hall felt tense again. Finally, the Emperor stood up from the throne once more. His heavy armor reflected the glowing lights of the hall as he slowly walked down the steps. He stopped a short distance from Eli again. "Your answer is simple," the Emperor said. Eli nodded. "I am a simple mechanic," he replied. The Emperor looked at him thoughtfully. "Sometimes simple answers are the most honest ones," he said. Then the Emperor turned toward his daughter. Princess Alara smiled slightly and nodded. "I like him," she said cheerfully. The Emperor looked back toward Eli again. "I will tell you something important, human," he said. Eli listened carefully. "Powerful empires often search for strength when choosing allies," the Emperor explained. "They want armies, fleets, and resources. But those things can change quickly." The Emperor pointed toward Eli slightly. "What rarely changes is character," he said. "Kindness, honesty, and responsibility." The Emperor slowly walked back toward the throne platform again. When he reached the top step, he turned around to face the entire hall. "Humanity may still be young compared to many civilizations," he continued. "But if even your poorest citizens can show compassion when they have nothing, then your species may have a future worth protecting." Eli felt slightly embarrassed hearing such praise. "I just gave someone food," he said quietly. Princess Alara smiled again. "And that is exactly why this matters," she replied. The Emperor raised one hand, signaling attention to the guards standing along the hall walls. "Prepare a transmission," he ordered. The soldiers immediately activated communication devices. Eli looked slightly confused. "What kind of transmission?" he asked. The Emperor looked down at him with calm confidence. A message to the entire Orion fleet, he answered. And soon after, a message to every human colony we can reach. Eli's eyes widened slightly. You mean? He said slowly. The Emperor nodded once. I have made my decision, he said. The soldiers in the hall stood straighter, waiting for the official command. The Emperor's voice became strong and formal now. For the first time in our empire's history, he announced, the Orion Dominion will offer humanity an alliance. Eli felt stunned hearing those words, but before he could even react, the Emperor continued speaking. And there is something else, he added. Eli looked up again. What else? He asked. The Emperor looked down at him with a small mysterious smile. Such an alliance must begin somewhere, he said. And I believe it should begin with the human who proved your species deserves the chance. Eli suddenly had a strange feeling that his life was about to change forever again, because the Emperor was now looking at him as if he had something very important in mind. The throne hall remained silent after the Emperor spoke those words. Eli Carter stood there, confused and nervous at the same time. He had already heard something unbelievable, humanity being offered an alliance with the Orion Dominion. But the Emperor's last words sounded like there was still something more, something that involved him personally. Eli looked up at the tall alien ruler standing on the throne platform. I do not understand, Eli said honestly. The Emperor stepped down from the platform again, his heavy armored footsteps echoing softly across the hall floor. I said that alliances must begin somewhere, the Emperor repeated, and the beginning of this one will be you. Eli blinked in surprise. Me? He asked, pointing at himself. The Emperor nodded calmly. Yes, he said. Princess Alera looked excited and stepped closer to Eli. I told you my father would be happy, she said proudly. Eli rubbed the back of his neck again, trying to make sense of everything. But I am just a mechanic, he said. I fix broken engines and cargo drones. The Emperor smiled slightly. Exactly, he replied. Eli looked even more confused now. The Emperor continued speaking in a calm but powerful voice. Powerful leaders often listen only to generals and politicians, he explained. But they forget something important. They forget the ordinary people who actually build civilizations. The Emperor gestured slightly toward Eli. You represent those people, he said. The workers, the builders, the ones who keep societies alive every day. Eli had never thought of himself that way before. The Emperor turned slightly toward the guards and officers standing around the hall. This human will become the first ambassador between our empire and humanity, he announced. The soldiers immediately stood straighter and nodded respectfully. Eli's eyes widened in shock. Wait, ambassador? He said quickly. I have never even left my station before today. Princess Alera laughed softly. Everyone has a first adventure, she said. Eli still looked overwhelmed. I do not know anything about diplomacy, he said. The Emperor folded his arms calmly. You know kindness, he replied. That is far more valuable. For a moment Eli stood quietly, thinking about everything that had happened during the last few hours. He had started the day repairing broken machines for small credits. Now he was being asked to represent humanity in a galactic alliance. It felt impossible, but then Eli remembered something. The workers back on Grey Dock 7, the tired cargo loaders, the mechanics, the food vendors, all the people struggling every day just to survive. Eli looked back at the Emperor again. If I accept this, can I ask for something? He said carefully. The Emperor raised an eyebrow slightly. You may ask, he replied. Eli took a small breath before speaking. The station where I live is falling apart, he explained. People there work hard but they barely survive. If this alliance is real, I want the first help to go to places like that, not to powerful governments or rich companies. The Emperor watched him silently for a moment. Then a slow smile appeared on the Emperor's face again. You continue to impress me, human, he said. The Emperor raised one hand toward the officers standing along the walls. Record this order, he commanded. The officers immediately activated their devices. The first humanitarian support from the Orion Dominion will be sent to Grey Dock 7. The Emperor announced, "Food supplies, medical technology, and station repairs will begin immediately." Eli felt a wave of relief hearing those words. "Thank you," he said quietly. Princess Alara smiled brightly. "I want to visit the station again when it is repaired," she said happily. Eli laughed slightly. "Maybe next time you can arrive without a giant war fleet," he joked. Even the Emperor gave a small amused breath at that comment. Outside the large viewing window behind the throne platform, the Orion fleet slowly began moving away from the station. Their mission finally complete, the Emperor looked out toward the stars for a moment before speaking again. "History will remember this day," he said calmly. Eli looked toward the window as well, watching the massive ships move through space. "All because of one small meal," Eli said quietly. Princess Alira shook her head gently. "No," she said, "because of one kind choice." Eli thought about that for a moment and smiled. Sometimes the galaxy changed not because of wars or powerful fleets, but because one person decided to help someone in need. And far away on Grey Dock 7, the tired workers had no idea that the simple mechanic they knew had just helped change the future of humanity forever.